Okay, we're picking up on what it looks like to be a person of depth and of meaning and of influence as we study through Nehemiah. And we're going to pick up right at the end of chapter 1, going into chapter 2. And there's a little bit of detail there that is super important to us. And this is what it is. We know from our last devotion, if you haven't watched it yet, you can watch back. We know from our last conversation that the first and most sort of important thing that happened in Nehemiah is that he allowed himself to feel the feelings. He allowed himself to feel that something wasn't right and that there was an injustice that was being had, and he was moved by it. He was moved to prayer. He was mourning about it. He was sad about it. And then it actually says in just a tiny little line at the end of the chapter, one of my favorite lines in scripture, all of this, as you read through, you end in this one sentence: I was the cupbearer to the king. So now we're going to take some feelings, a movement of the heart, alongside of the placement and positioning of the person. So when you think about your own life and you're moved by something, the next question is, where has God placed you very specifically and intentionally that is going to give you a position to do something about the injustice that you're experiencing, about the thing that you're moved by, about the thing that's important to you? That may be a position like Nehemiah within a power structure or within a company or organization that gives you access to some resources that you might not have. It may be that you have access to time in a way that is specific to the season that you're in. Perhaps you're in graduate school, or you have young children, or for some reason you've got a little bit more time, or you're single, and you can use that time to actually grow in your own learning, to grow in your understanding of whatever that thing is that you're moved by. You might be moved by the idea that people don't know the Bible that well. You might be moved by the idea that people are not experiencing the kind of health in their soul or in their body that they really could. It doesn't have to be this massive issue, although of course God is very clear and specific about some of the massive issues of our day, such as the foreigner, the widow, the orphan. There's things in scripture that you're going to be moved by because God's heart is moved by them. But as you consider those things and as you're moved by them, the next thing to consider is, where has God placed me? Where am I right now in my life? Who do I have access to? Who do I have influence over? And so Nehemiah, what he realized was that he had access to the king. He was placed in a very particular position for a very particular time because he could do something about the thing he was moved by, about the problems in Jerusalem. He had the opportunity to do something about them. But here's the other thing, and you might miss this if you don't read closely. In this account, 4 or so months go by before Nehemiah actually does something about the thing that he's moved by. I don't like to feel sad about something for like 2 days, much less 2 months or 4 months. But we know that Nehemiah was really seeking God and seeking God's will and God's best over the course of that 4 months before he had the opportunity to act. But the other thing we know by the way that Nehemiah acted is that he did have a plan. He had a plan and he had a thought and he had a way that he thought something new could happen. Something could be different, but he didn't act on it until the time was right. So the next principle that I want you to take from being a person of depth and of meaning and of influence is that we have to be moved. We have to feel our feelings. The second thing is we have to read our life. We have to know where we've been positioned and what might God have given us in our particular time and place, be it the city that you live in, the position that you hold, the time that you have, the resources that you have access to. What might God be doing with those specific things that he's given you? And then third is, are you prepared, but are you also waiting for God to act? Are you waiting for the moment when God says yes? And I'm going to talk next week about what those kind of moments look like when we know that God is saying yes. So stay tuned, and we'll be back together again next week to take on principle number 3, when to act.